Good evening, my friends. We're back. 2024 is here. I got a lot to say. Today, we're going to start with the most important thing on everyone's mind. Buyers are concerned about this. Agents and lenders are trying to figure out, how do we approach this? And I'm going to give you today just the straight facts. It won't be, you'll know when I'm giving you my opinion, but I'm just going to pepper you with facts today so that you can figure out what is the real cost to waiting. What's the real cost? What is it actually going to cost you to wait to buy real estate? Some people have learned this lesson the hard way. There's no question about that. You know, I know people who've been renting for a decade. And so sometimes, in most cases, it's very difficult to grasp, comprehend, and accept what is happening overall. So today I'm going to show you the macro side of this whole thing, the macro side of this equation. Why is it that home prices just continue to go astronomically higher? What's the real reason for this? And it's a little bit different than what you think. So we're going to go through that. And I'm also going to show you how you can, on really any given property that you might be considering, how you can get an idea of what your cost of waiting is. Now, if you are looking on social media, I just Googled cost of waiting to buy a home. There's all kinds of graphics. You're going to see people, pull up saying, hey, look at this. Next year, this is what it's going to be worth. 10 years from now, 3% appreciation per year. Here's what the home's will be worth. The problem with that is that it's arguable. We don't know. We don't know what the future is going to bring for anything. We don't know what stock prices will be. We don't know what home prices will be. We don't know what interest rates will be. So we really don't know. All we can really do when we're looking at the actual cost of waiting to buy a home is say, well, what has the cost been? What has the cost been? And what are the driving factors behind these costs that can help us understand whether they're likely to continue or not? And that's what I want to show you today. I want everyone to know that we don't know what the future will bring, but we have a very good idea of what's happening based on momentum. So the first graph we're going to look at, and I'm going to show you how this, I just picked up an example property. This, by the way, this listing, I don't know whose it is or where it came from. I just picked up a random house listed on Zillow. That's where we're going to use in our example. And I haven't looked at the details yet. So median sales price of houses sold in the United States. So when you look at this, this goes back to the 60s, by the way, back to the 60s. This little move right here, from here to here, that was the real estate crash. The global financial crisis caused that real estate crash right there. That was a crash. 257 median price down to 208. It's about 20% drop on average. That's the worst thing we've seen in the history of these records. It's the worst one. Pretty crazy, huh? So we know what caused that. We know what was behind that. Tons of fraud, Wall Street, hands all in the mortgage business, lack of regulation. What has spawned from that? HVCC, House Valuation Code of Conduct, CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, completely regulated disclosures. Everything's changed. Everything's changed. The process that banks do, foreclosures by also changed. You have forbearance now, modifications. Everything's completely different. That situation happening again is essentially impossible. Essentially. Could there be some new thing? Of course, something new and unforeseen could happen at any time. But based on what we know, that situation happening again is basically impossible. Now, when I was telling people that, not too long after it happened, and you see what happened. This was a shakeout, and now it's happened. Prices just running away higher. The most important lesson that the market taught us during this process is when things really hit the fan in 2020 right here, we saw there was just a couple of weeks of uncertainty. And after that, look what happened. Average median price after bottom there at 322, all the way up to 479 in just a few years. Recent success story that we have I work with a lot of military buyers, a lot of VA buyers, and this is an active duty buyer, get relocated to North Carolina. He sold his house in Marietta and he made over $200,000 in net profit. No tax, after tax, tax-free. 200,000. Most money he's ever had in his life. What did he do? All he did was he just bought a house. He didn't time the market. He didn't do anything crazy. He just bought a house. That's it. But now, if he were looking to buy that same house today, right? You see the difference? A few years later, the house is a couple $100,000 more. This is a pattern that we see repeat. Now, why is this pattern repeating? Why does this continue to happen? This is what's called the M2 money supply, the amount of money that is in circulation. You've heard a lot about, the Federal Reserve printing money. Maybe you've never looked at it on a graph, but they create insane amounts of money. And if you'll let me just kind of try to overlay these two graphs, right? So here's the money supply, real estate prices. Money supply, real estate prices. See how similar those two things are? What you could argue with this data is that it's not even that your house is worth more money, it's that the dollars you're using to buy it are worth less. The dollar is weakening, and the weakening dollar certainly causes asset prices to go higher. This is why many people say you should own gold or silver in your portfolio or Bitcoin, digital gold, because the United States dollar is being devalued and has been for quite some time. And because of that, hard assets such as real estate, gold, etc., will go up in value. And you could make the argument that that is really all that's going on here. That's all that's going on. You could. There's more to the story than that. But if you look at these two graphs, you could easily just say that's all it is. Now, if you're wanting to know how do I calculate what potentially my cost to waiting might be, because when you look at these kind of things, these prognostications about the future, you could easily just disagree and say, you know what, well, I disagree. I don't think that next year it'll be worth that much, or the year after that, or 5 years from now, that home values will go that high. Here's what you do. Pick the house that you're interested in, and it may be one that's not the perfect one for you, but it's one that, is in the area or the price range that you're looking for. And this is the nice thing. One of the nice things about Zillow, one of the few nice things, I'm not a huge fan, but there are a couple things that are nice. The Zestimate tool can be useful, not for exactness, but to understand trend. So what you do is you go to the listing here, whichever one is you're interested in, go down to the Zestimate history. Now, most of these you're going to see are going to go back to 2014, almost to the beginning of 2014. This house today, which estimated range, its estimate is 884 on it. It's listed for how much though? 880 was 899. The estimate on it is 884. Okay, range of 840 to 929, giving a number somewhere in the middle there on the estimate side of 884. Now, if you look at that and you go, okay, well, just go back a few years and say, all right, where were we, 3 years ago? If we want to prognosticate 3 years, just go back 3 years. 3 years ago today would have been, let's see, we're January. So January 2021. January 2021, the estimate on this home was 620,000. So it's gone from 620,000 to 884,000. Well, what's happened during that time? What has taken place during this time? Because, Derek, it could just be that this last 3 years, maybe there's things that have happened that have been unfair towards the market, things that will not be there in the future. And if you think that's the case, it's actually the most perfect 3 to 4 year period ever to take a look at how the market values real estate. So if the market values real estate based on these external factors, so what do we have? In 2020, 2021, the Fed cut rates down to where the average interest rate was in the twos. That's for conventional FHA, VA, the whole thing, in the twos. During the same 3 year period, they also whipsawed those rates back up to 20 plus year highs, and the average interest rate got almost to 8%. So in this same window right here, the same 3 year window, we had the Fed cut rates down to the lowest they've ever been, and then they raised them up faster than they ever have to where they got to a point that we haven't seen rates that high in multiple decades. But notice what happened to real estate values during that time. So, if those are the external factors you believe that were unique to change the market, just know that we've seen both sides of that coin. I've seen both sides of the interest rate coin, and just look what's happened. So, this is why I believe this last 3 years is actually the perfect 3 years to get a feel for what the market is really telling us overall about real estate values and where they're headed. Because if we see another rate cutting cycle, like many people, like myself, are expecting between this year and next year, we may see this whole thing repeat itself over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. And if it does, then going back 3 years from today on something like this to get yourself an idea, remember 621,000 is what this estimate was in this home. And now this estimate is 884,500. We could see very similar cycle repeat. Now, these are generalizations. We don't know exact numbers of what this home is going to sell for or what it would have sold for in January 2021. We don't know. But you can look at any home this way and you can see. Now, imagine in January 2021, if this home had been for sale for around this estimate at 621,000, if the people who had looked at it and not bought it would have still not bought it if they knew that it would ultimately, within a few years, get to 884,500. Do you think anybody would have passed up on it? Is there a soul out there who would have said, you know what? No, thanks. No, thank you. I do not have the desire to make 30 or 40% of my money in a few years. I don't think so. And so this is the part that is difficult to grasp. It's very difficult to grasp and understand what is taking place here and what the likelihood is of it to continue. Because as Americans, the way that we buy and sell goods, the way that we participate in the market as a consumer, we very much drive everything. We are completely catered to. And if we don't like something, we can tell somebody. If we bought something we don't like, we can take it back and they'll give us our money. The real estate market does not work like this. The real estate market will run away from you. The real estate market isn't going to come back to the price where you want it. It isn't going to cater to you. I'm sorry. I wish it worked that way. It just does not. It does not operate in the same fashion that the rest of our economy operates. It just doesn't. It operates on its own. And it operates based on supply, which is we are very short of, and demand, which there is aplenty. So when you look at any one of these properties, don't go back too far because the numbers are crazy. I mean, if we go back to the very beginning of this estimate history here, March of 2014, this home's 380,000. Now it's 880,000. A lot more than a double in just 10 years. That's very hard to fathom, isn't it? It's hard to fathom in the next 10 years that this $884,000 home might be worth 1.7 million or more, 2 million. It's hard to fathom. It has been this way forever. If you talk to anyone who bought a house in the 70s, talk to anyone who bought a house in the 80s, talk to anyone who bought a house in the 90s, talk to anyone who bought real estate in the past and ask them, did you ever think it would be worth that much today? And they would say, I would have told you you were absolutely crazy. Off your rocker, mental. It should be institutionalized for saying things like this. But nevertheless, it has taken place. Now, the money supply is definitely a big part of it, but there are other fundamentals involved here, mostly supply and demand, household formation, and of course, inflation and the weakening of the dollar are playing a role. But if you want to really know and understand what your cost of waiting is, you can't guess what the future will hold. We just don't know. We don't know exactly what it will be. So we don't know what your cost of waiting will be for the next 3 years. But we can more accurately calculate what it has been. So if you were going to buy right before COVID and you decided not to because the pandemic scared you, then you could go back and you could say, well, let's see, that was March of 2020. You could go back and say, all right, how much has it cost us? That is not arguable. This is very factual. So for this particular home, if you were going to buy right before the pandemic and the pandemic hits and you decided to wait and you just haven't gotten back in, then you are looking at 554,000. So this home's gone up 330,000 in those almost 4 years, 330 grand. So you can see what the cost of waiting is. But it's not just the purchase price that you have to keep in mind when you're doing this. You have to keep in mind, let's look here. I've got this somewhere. There's an opportunity cost as well. Because when you own a home, you're going to be making a mortgage payment instead of rent. And within that mortgage payment, you're going to be paying down the principal on the loan. So part of what you're paying each month is actually just going into your own equity. You're paying yourself, essentially. Also, the interest that you pay, if you itemize your deductions, talk to your tax professional, is also going to be tax deductible for almost everyone. Not everyone, but almost everyone will be able to deduct that interest against your earned income, meaning that you will save however much you pay in interest times your tax rate in cold, hard cash. So that helps a lot of people save money on tax time. And then, of course, what we've just been talking about, and the only thing that we've been looking at so far is just the potential for appreciation. What is the home itself going to be worth? But obviously, if you buy a home, and this is going to be a tough concept, stay with me. If you buy a home and it costs you $200,000 or $300,000 more because you waited a few years, does it really cost you $200,000 or $300,000 more if you're getting a loan? No, it costs you a lot more than that, because now you've got that $200,000 or $300,000 you're financing over 30 years, which is going to cost you about triple that. So literally, if a home goes up $200,000 or $300,000 over the course of the lifetime of a loan, you're going to end up paying potentially $1 million more out of your pocket for that home. Now, it may not be that significant with every home. I just picked a random one. I don't know. It could be worse for other ones. I just literally selected this one just off of, I just did a search for detached homes and just picked one. So we could look at a different one too. Let's look at one that's listed for a similar price. And then this is a 6-bedroom home. And let's just see what this one looks like. Let's use this graph now. Okay. It's going to probably look similar. Let's go back to January 2021, 732 versus 904. Okay. So less on this one. So this case, $160,000 over the last 3 years. Okay. So in that case, if you pay $160,000 more after 3 years of waiting, then that $160,000 is probably, or $170,000, sorry, bad math by me. The $170,000 is going to turn into about $500,000 or so over the course of the life of the loan. So you actually end up paying $500,000 more, not just the $170,000. Now, if you're paying cash, if you're not financing, then it's just about the purchase price. But if you're financing the home, then you have to look at what the total cost of the payments is. Now, there's a lot of variables there with interest rates, what's going to happen if you refinance, those kinds of things. A lot of variables here. So we're using generalizations. But these generalizations do pan out over large periods of time. And that's kind of how we're calculating this right now. So it's not just about the price that you pay. That's part of it. But it's also about how much you pay to own the home. And this is where my profession comes in. My goal is to help you minimize the amount that you actually pay for the home. Because the purchase price, your realtor's going to negotiate that. They're going to do their best for you. You're going to put your best foot forward, try to get the best deal you can. But after that, now you've got to pay it. You don't really pay it then. The bank pays it. The bank pays your purchase price. You put a down payment. They pay the rest. Then you got to pay it. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So it's not just about the purchase price, but also about the other thing. So there's opportunity costs to not owning, because when you rent, you don't get any of these things. And then there's the real cost when you're renting, which is rent. You can just simply take the amount that you're paying in rent and say, okay, over the last 3 years, how much have we paid in rent? And that number, if you're paying, let's say $3,000 a month in rent, that's $36,000, which takes you to what, $108,000. So over 3 years, if you're paying $3,600 a month, this equals $108K over 3 years. So there's this. So you have a real cost, and then you also have your opportunity cost. It's very, very, very expensive to rent. And at the end of the day, we all have to make a decision. And I'm not saying that you're wrong if you want to be a renter. I don't know that many people who want to be renters, but I'm just saying that it's not very economically efficient. That much is sure. I'm certain of that. It is not economically efficient to rent. And most of us know that. The question is, how vigorously should you pursue homeownership? How much sacrifice should I make? What if I can't buy that perfect house for me? What if I have to make a sacrifice on something else? What if I need to refinance my car to save a few $100 on that so that I can, you know, qualify for the home that I want? Is that all worth it? Ultimately, you have to make a decision. You're going to be on one side of the river or the other. Either you're going to own real estate or you're going to rent real estate from someone who owns it. I think we all know, at least my generation grew up playing Monopoly. We all know you want to be the one who owns the real estate. And the more of it that you own, the better off you're going to be. And I still believe that that's very, very true. The macroeconomic scenario that we are in right now would also lead us to believe that that is the case. So I think you should take a very hard look at this. And if you want to calculate your real cost of waiting, don't look at these flyers. A lot of people will post these things, that say this different stuff. They're prognosticating. It's very, very difficult to believe and buy into those things. But what you can do, it's very, very real and 100% factual, is use this Zillow tool, the Zestimate, which is not 100% accurate, but it's at least consistent in what it's calculating over the years. So when we use it to compare from one time to the other, it gives us something. And this will tell you over certain periods of time how much things have changed. And you can just simply go back to those years. When did we first start talking about buying a house, honey? Oh, well, I guess that was 2 or 3 years ago. You can simply go back and you can just calculate how much has it cost you so far? Because if you haven't bought a home, it's for sure cost you something. The question is just how much. How much more is it going to cost before you get to the point of understanding what's really at stake? How much is on the table? It's not as simple as just, well, our rent is, $4,000 a month. And if we bought a house, our payment would be like $5,500 a month. So we're actually saving $1,500 a month in renting. That is 100% incorrect. Because you have to look at the entire picture. The opportunity cost, the real cost, and the opportunity cost includes the potential for appreciation, which we have seen time and time again, particularly in the San Diego marketplace. So today, I just wanted to give you this quick tool so that you can understand on your own. You don't need to listen to any of these prognostications. Just simply go back and look over time. How much has it cost me so far? From the first time that I would have considered buying a home, and the first time I think I would have possibly been able to buy a home until today, how much has it cost me so far? You don't need to think about necessarily what it's going to cost to wait 3 more years. I hope that you do the math now and see that there's not much value in waiting. It's very, very expensive to wait. And I fear that it's going to continue to get much more expensive. And hopefully this is a helpful tool for you to understand and be able to calculate on your own without necessarily needing someone, even to talk to a salesperson or anything. Just do this on your own and see what conclusions that you come to. And of course, always let me know if you have questions about any of this stuff. I am happy to help. Run numbers, do a pre-approval. It all starts with that. You don't buy a house in a day. Remember, this is not like buying a toaster or getting a bedroom set from Nordstrom. You're investing in the most essential, best investment vehicle that we've ever seen. It's not going to happen overnight. Baby steps. Get pre-approved. Look at the market. See what fits your budget. Get on the right side of the river. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Have a good night, my friends. I'll be here if you need me.